You're standing under harsh fluorescent lights, the kind that make every airport feel colder than it really is. Your carry-on feels heavier than usual, even though you've taken the same bag on dozens of flights before. The TSA agent gestures for you to step aside. No shouting, no urgency, just a quiet pause that makes your stomach tighten. You place your suitcase onto the measuring platform. A screen flashes red. This bag no longer qualifies as a carry-on under the new rules. You blink. Nothing about your bag looks different. So why does it suddenly feel like you've done something wrong? What changed without anyone telling you? What you just experienced isn't bad luck, and it isn't because you packed carelessly. Over the last few years, airlines and the TSA have been fighting a problem they rarely talk about out loud. Too many carry-ons, overcrowded cabins, delayed boarding, and constant arguments at the gate. Every minute a plane sits on the ground costs money. Every overhead bin dispute slows everything down. So instead of negotiating with passengers, they changed the system. New carry-on rules, quietly rolled out and enforced more aggressively heading into 2026, shift decisions away from human judgment and toward automation. Measuring platforms, weight sensors, and standardized limits now do what gate agents used to let slide. The problem is, these changes weren't announced with flashing headlines. They were buried in fine print, airline updates, and internal TSA procedures. That's why people pass check-in without an issue, only to be stopped at the gate. That's why a bag you've carried for 10 years suddenly becomes non-compliant. And for older travelers who trust familiar routines and familiar luggage, the shock is even worse. At TSA, it's easy to think the process is about rules and objects, liquids, shoes, laptops, bags. But long before anyone opens your suitcase, they're watching you. They notice how long you hesitate before placing your bag down. They notice if your hands hover, unsure. They notice when you start explaining, before anyone asked you to. That moment of micro-hesitation is what matters, because by the time you reach the checkpoint, your boarding pass has already been scanned, your travel pattern already logged. TSA systems know where you're going, how often you fly, and whether today fits your usual routine. So when an agent looks up and calmly asks you to step aside, it isn't curiosity, it's confirmation. This is why long explanations work against you. When someone says, well, I've always used this bag, and last time they didn't mind, and I'm only going for a few days. It creates friction. Short, steady movements signal familiarity. Over-explaining signals uncertainty. And uncertainty, fair or not, gets flagged. For years, the standard carry-on size sounded simple, 22 by 14 by 9 inches. Most travelers memorized the numbers and stopped thinking about them. What changed is what those numbers now include. Under the newer enforcement rules moving toward 2026, airlines measure everything, wheels, handles, and hard edges included. A suitcase that once passed easily can now fail by a single inch. And when it does, there's no debate. At many airports, your bag is no longer eyeballed by a gate agent. It's scanned. Automated measuring platforms detect height, width, depth, and sometimes weight at the same time. If your bag exceeds the limit, even slightly, the system flags it. The screen turns red. The decision is final. This is why travelers are being stopped at the gate instead of check-in. Check-in still allows discretion. The gate does not. Weight limits are also being enforced more strictly. Many airlines quietly cap carry-ons between 8 and 10 kilograms. If your bag feels heavy enough to slow you down, that alone can trigger a closer look. And here's the detail most people miss. Measuring your bag at home doesn't help if you didn't include the wheels. Some of the biggest carry-on problems in 2026 won't come from your suitcase. They'll come from what's inside it. Power banks are a perfect example. For years, travelers tossed them into bags without a second thought. Now, anything over 100 watt-hours can trigger questions, delays, or outright confiscation if it isn't declared properly. And if an agent asks you to turn it on and it doesn't respond, the conversation ends there. The same rule applies to laptops, tablets, and medical electronics. If it can't power on, it can't fly in your carry-on. Then there's smart luggage. Built-in batteries once felt like a luxury. Now they're a liability. If the battery isn't removable, many airlines won't allow the bag in the cabin at all. But the most common trap happens at the gate. You see the metal sizing frame. Out of curiosity or confidence, you place your bag inside just to check. That moment is often irreversible. Once the bag is measured, the process starts. If it fails, the fee is triggered. No arguments, no appeals. Ironically, travelers with soft bags who keep them close, underfoot, and out of sight often pass through without attention, simply because they don't volunteer themselves for inspection. Picture two travelers standing at the same gate. They're on the same flight. They paid the same fare. The first traveler moves calmly. Their bag rolls easily. When boarding is called, they step forward, lift their carry-on without hesitation, and slide it into the overhead bin. No questions, no delays. The second traveler looks just as prepared until they aren't. Their bag gets a second glance, then a signal to step aside, a red screen, a quiet conversation. Within minutes, the difference becomes expensive. A carry-on fee at the gate is higher than at check-in. Sometimes, much higher. The line behind them grows restless. Their boarding group is called again without them. Missed boarding leads to missed connections. Missed connections ripple into hotel changes, rebooked flights, and anxious phone calls to family members waiting on the other end. What began as a small measurement issue turns into a stressful chain reaction, and once it starts, there's very little you can do to stop it. Avoiding these problems in 2026 isn't about traveling lighter, it's about traveling smarter. Start with tools, not guesswork. A small handheld luggage scale costs less than a meal at the airport, yet it removes uncertainty completely. If your carry-on is near the limit, you'll know before anyone else does. Next, look at your suitcase itself. Many newer models are now labeled as carry-on compliant under updated airline standards. That label matters more than the brand name. And when you measure at home, include everything: wheels, handles, and rigid edges. Inside the bag, keep power banks under 100 watt-hours and make sure electronics can turn on when asked. For smart luggage, confirm that the battery can be removed quickly without tools. For older travelers, there's one advantage most people forget: you can ask. Asking politely about early boarding, mobility assistance, or gate support often reduces scrutiny, not increases it. As automation increases, flexibility decreases. In the future, knowing the rules ahead of time will matter more than arguing them on the spot. The new carry-on rules for 2026 aren't designed to trap you, but they will catch anyone who isn't prepared. The difference between a smooth journey and a stressful one no longer comes down to luck. It comes down to knowing what's changed and adjusting before you reach the gate. If this helped you see the system more clearly, share it with someone who still trusts an old suitcase. Leave a comment with your airport experience and subscribe so you're never surprised at the gate again.